A very good afternoon to all the students here. And for the next 30 minutes today, I have just made a proper PPT based audio presentation for you to cover up the second portion, most important portion about the historical development of the concept called OD. As you know, we have been talking a lot about in our classes the change, the perspectives of change, the need, the necessity, the forces of the change, and the various facets of the change. So, in the screen, you could see the recapitulation about what we had discussed so long, and even the change management process where we have left last. So, the basic question when we talk about a change arises like why and how we would like to welcome a change and what should be the arena of it. As we have discussed many a times, that change is the most permanent thing, inevitable, and it reaches every single individual on this planet, even to the complex phenomena called organizations, businesses, industries. The various facets we have always talked about are like these four or five, but then planned change is what we are thinking and looking forward to when we understand OD as a concept. So, as I have told you, planned change is basically the interventions, the processes, the tools and techniques given by the OD to make the change in a more planned way. Yes, there are few more facets of it like micro, macro, and following few more. But then you would understand this all would take its place if things are being more planned way. So planned change is what we should look forward to or we should sense while having a change. We should plan it that way. So it would be a larger impact, a larger and a better impact for your organization to be more effective for all your four P's basically. So your product, people, processes, and the entire performance of your organization is what is equal to the organizational effectiveness. The entire exercise of an OD is focused upon making organization more impactful, more agile, and more effective in senses. So, this is how the bridge between the organization change and the need to understand OD as a concept, OD as a tool, and to be more skillful, knowledgeable, and competent enough to undertake OD as an exercise wherever, whenever needed in your further days. So, to bridge a gap, this is what the topic of today's discussion is the historical development of an OD. Any concept does have its past, its present, and its future. Like that, OD is a concept which is, of course, new to India and it's still in an evolving stage because the businesses, the industries are still into an evolving stage. We are into a developing country stage, so it is still evolving. But yes, OD has about 100 years. It's going to touch in by 2040. It is going to touch 100 years as a concept. This was first understood with a lot of experimentations on the human resources. You must be aware or you must be remembering your first classes of your semester 1 and 2 when you talked about management as principles, management as art and skill of doing and learning the things by objectively by observing it. If you could recollect the industrial evolution, the entire industrial evolution, you know, the hands were replaced by machines. That is called industrial revolution. That is called labor revolution. So labor were replaced by machines. And there were a lot of more complexities added to those business organizations, those who were labor intensive and went to a machine intensive technology. There, the human problem, the labor movement, the the actual crux of the people got more surfaced. And people like behavioral scientists, industrial researchers, psychologists, psychotherapists, these all people got a scope to surface these problems in a more organized way and in a more very stubborn way. If you could recollect Hawthorne experiment, that experiment has given a huge movement to the human relations approach. So, according to those all experimentations and those all observations, there was an evolution, and that evolution led us to make it more happening and to make it more structured, and therefore the OD concept got evolved. It got evolved somewhere between 1945 to 1947. In the front of your screen, you could see that this is a wonderful example I could give when it comes to an OD concept. It's a mangrove tree, and this tree has four stems, four major stems. You would find it anywhere, and this tree would always be standing on their four major stems. And these four major stems is actually an analogy to make you understand the historical development of an OD. The first stem is the most important and the beginner, the propounding stem is the laboratory training, which was being propounded by Kurt Lewin. And this was identified somewhere between 1940 45. Kurt Lewin was a prolific theorist. He was a wonderful researcher and he was a practitioner specifically into interpersonal group, intergroup, and community relationships. Levin founded Research Center for Group Dynamics about in 1945, and he had a lot of people along with him as his staff. He was basically a social psychologist, I should say, and he is famous for his all theories and models and researches which is still applicable. He has got two major theories: the three step change process theory, which he is famous for, and force field theory, which is again famous for, which is an intervention of an OD, and action research. The concept of an action research, just opposite on the screen, just opposite to the laboratory training point, there is the action research point, which was followed by Herbert Schepper, his follower, Kurt Levin's follower, Kurt Levin's legacy, I could say. So, Kurt Lewin was the first person who could propound this terminology called the laboratory training. With a thorough and series of events and experimentations, he named his all experimentation under this nomenclature called the L train, the laboratory training, or it is also called T group. It is also called T group, it is also called L groups, and it is also called sensitivity training. These are all not specific to training and development only, but in general, these are applicable even to the communities at large. So, from his point of view, I would just tell you how did he conducted his experiments and what has resulted out of it. Through a series of events at the New Britain workshop of 1946, it was later called T Group, began to emerge. The workshop consisted of Kurt Lewin and his fellow colleagues Ronald Lippitt, Bradford, and many. His three colleagues served as leaders of a learning group. Each group, in addition to group members, who were the group members? The group members were from the organization, the employees of the organization, those who sat for an experiment with Kurt Lewin and his three colleagues. His three colleagues became the leaders, and the group members were the organization employees. So, in each group, in addition to the group members and a leader, had an observer. This was a wonderful experiment which Kurt Lewin himself undertook as an observer. And he adopted two more observers along with him to undertake the entire experiment. So, I was telling you, each group have a group member from organization as an employees of an organization, the leaders, the colleagues of Kurt Lewin, and an observer who made various notes about interactions among the members. So they were given some topic, some exercise, some activity, and they were asked to work in that particular group. And while they were working in that particular group for certain activity to be undertaken, they were being observed, like how do they communicate with each other, how do they behave formally, informally, and how was their body language, how were their words which they chose to talk for, discuss for. So these were all interactions were being observed by the observer. So once the entire activity was done, the observer was sitting silent, somewhere out of the reach, but in the reach territory to understand these all interactions among the group members, and he was taking down some notes as an observer. So at the end of an each day, the observer met with the staff and reported what they had seen. So these observers, along with the staff members, they were discussing about what exactly had happened during the group interaction process. So at the end, at the second or a third evening, so this was a 3 day sessions. So the same followed in the second day experiment, the same followed in the third day experiment. So second and or a third evening session, three members of the group were asked if they could sit in on the reporting session and were encouraged to do so. So one woman disagreed with the observer about the meaning of her behavior during the day's session, and a lively discussion ensued. So what was going on? So after the 3 days experimentation, whatever recordings were being done by the observer, it was discussed among the group, among their staff members. But then, after the 3 evening sessions, the members of the group, that is, the employees, were requested if they could sit in their official staff meeting wherein they have a reporting session, and come and have their say also that what they have observed was actually being done, was okay, or what are their views. So in the same session, some one of the women that was from the organization disagreed that whatever was observer giving the comments on her behavioral pattern or her interaction pattern, she disagreed that no, this is not what I believe it is true, but this is what I was doing it. So this all emerged into a lively group discussion session. So these three workshop members then asked to return to the next reporting session. And because of this lively and rich discussion among the group member and the staff member, everybody was very much interactive. They were open to listening, open to active listening. They were open to their observations, accepting it, rejecting it. And this is how the entire group became the one group, and that group is called the T group, the T group or laboratory training group. So this is how was the experiment of the Kurt Lewin, and this ended up like something. By the next evening, about half of the 50 to 60 members of the workshop attended the feedback session. That then, after all the group members, those who sat for an experiment, about half of the entire strength went through this feedback session. So this has made people more aware about their own persona, their own feelings, their own observations, and their own group interactions. How do they react to, how do they interact with each other? And there, from them, the learnings came out, the learning experiences came out. And therefore, this is called a laboratory experimentation, wherein you understand your abilities, your weaknesses, or your strength areas from the other group members, and you work upon it. So these feedback sessions was held that time, and even today you could see that there are still such practices in the organizations, and people do believe into having a feedback or giving a feedback. And this was the beginning of the concept called developmental concept. Therein the development begins, or therein the actually development starts, emerges of an individual, of the group, and therefore of an organization, because organization is made up of a group. So this is a wonderful beginning of the OD concept from the Kurt Levin's experimentations, his observations in the society as a social psychologist, as an industrial psychologist, and his contribution to this particular concept and the entire theory still very much valuable and precious. As I have said, the other part, the action research part, is nothing but the extension of his old theories into the newer ways, into the newer systems, and therefore the further research was being carried out by Herbert Shepard and his all colleagues on the works done by Kurt Lewin. Down below, there are two more stems of this historical development, which has also contributed vastly for the organization to flourish and accept change. And this is the left side, you could see the survey, research, and feedback. This stem was propounded by Rensis Likert and few more others, but Likert and Likert scale is very much known to all of us. It is not very new to us, which we occasionally use, and nowadays it is regularly used as one of the most important part of our research instruments. In your research methodology subject, you would come into the qualitative research part. There you would find Likert name many a time, Likert scale. We'll do this detailing part when we'll go in our next unit, unit number 3, about the process of OD. In the process of OD, there is a process called diagnosis. So when it comes to a diagnosing part, it is basically researching part. So there we are going to use Rensis Likert's work in an extensive way. The other side here is the socio-technical or the socio-clinical, which was propounded by Bain and Eric Twist. As the name suggests you, the socio-technical, the socio part is always there when it comes to an OD, because it was the Levin's work which has influenced all his followers, all other following researchers, experimenters, and therefore Bain and Eric Twist worked upon the idea of Levin, and that idea was a social field. Can't we use this laboratory training to the community people at a large? But with a notion, Levin's notion was that it can be applicable for a therapeutic way. It can be applicable for as a therapy, not just as a training intervention or an observation intervention, or just a tool to understand oneself, but in a more therapeutic way. So Bain and Eric Twist had an experiment that was called Northfield experiment, and it was for a 6 week. And the entire idea or a notion behind this experiment was to make understand individuals about their feelings, about their interpersonal relations in a more deeper way. So this experiment was basically done at a military hospital, which was near Birmingham, and it was during the World War II. In this experiment, each soldier was required to join a group that performed some tasks such as handicraft or a map reading, and as well as discuss feelings, interpersonal relations, and administrative and managerial problems. So insights from this experiment carried over into Baynes' theory, and his theory was about group behavior. Why do we behave differently when we are involved into a group? And why do we behave exactly differently when we are being into an individual zone? So this stem of OD is a very new stem and it is still emerging. It was somewhere between late 60s, later half of the 1960s, this was established. The concept was more provoking, and even today we could find that this is more applicable to the industrial psychology area and more adapted by today's psychotherapist when they work it as a therapy and make individuals feel comfortable about exploring their own feelings and their own inhibitions and come out of that with a very concrete solutions. So it is this insights which we can still apply it not only to the individuals but to the group and to the entire organization. So in broadly, we'll have to understand the historical development of the OD in detail with the help of these four steps or four stems, I should say. Kurt Lewin, and you can more explore on him and his good theories which are still applicable. This third slide would give you a brief overview about the laboratory training, which I just explained you what he had done. So basically, it is always done into a small unstructured groups which doesn't belong to the similar organization. Even to them, it can be applicable for. Yes, it has to be small, maybe a group of 6 to 8 members in one group, and then you can have one observer which is assigned to that particular group or groups. Maybe one observer can have an observation to be done on one, two, maximum two groups, and a group leader and the group members, and that is how the things are being carried on, like the experiment which Kurt Lewin has done in his days. What interactions and what learnings come out of it is basically implies towards four factors which are independent in itself, which are very big in itself. These four are interpersonal relations. We are more concerned about today's organization and its complex nature, and we know that personalities or individuals are complex in their nature. So understanding interpersonal relations, this could be the good method. The laboratory training could be good, one of the best method to understand each other's interpersonal relations or to make employees understand about it. Like that, we have a personal growth, leadership, and even the group dynamics. The concept of group dynamics came because the laboratory training method were always done on the groups. It was not done individually but on the groups. So the how do group behave, how do group get interact with each other, how do they have their forms, how do they form up, what are their norms, what are their beliefs, why they get connected to each other, how much time do they take, how much valuable they feel being a part of a group. So these all intricacies come under the umbrella which is called group dynamics. So students, group dynamics itself is an independent study. you know it's an independent method of a study. Like that, we have a leadership, we also have a personal growth aspirations, our own mission, vision, goals in our life. So this can be, talked within the group, with within the group members, and this can be observed that how do one feel, or how do one believes of, how do one can contribute towards the group. So these four factors were basically being observed during this technique of laboratory training, which is also called sensitivity training or a T group method. Yes, Kurt Levin's change model, as I said, Kurt Levin has given us two major contributions for the OD theory, and one is about his change concept, how do he believes the change should be taken for, and the another was his one more model which is in use today extensively in the OD as one of the intervention. Intervention is basically the solution. So in front of you it is the Kurt Levin's change model, very easy to understand. What does he wanted to pass on is take change in three steps. Unfreeze, change perspective, have your change plan, and refreeze. So determine what needs to be changed. Ensure there is a strong leadership support. Create the need for the change. Motivate for the change. Manage and understand the doubts and the concerns about the change. Once you start unfreezing your thought process for these all points, you are in a state of a mind, or you are in a state of affairs wherein you understand or sense the change. Yes, there is a need. You have already sensed it. So that all phase, or that all steps can be clubbed into the first step is called unfreezing. Unfreezing your thoughts. The moment you have unfreeze your thought, you are ready for the next very step, and that is called a change. You think about, yes, now I have to make few actions in such a manner that I can see my desired state. My present state is this, and I wanted to see my desired state. And during that journey, the gap is to be filled with the change therapy or the change plan. So, Kurt Lewin believes into that. Once an individual or an organization unfreezes, the next thing is open to learn. They are open to understand. They are more open to observations. So the change phenomena is the second step. Change, communicate with each other, communicate oftenly, communicate repetitively, communicate rightly in the right network. Dispel rumors. Rumors all about why people would never welcome the change. That is the resistance part. So, resistance, the moment resistance is being exhibited, the rumors would generate. So, as a change management planner, I am most vigil about, are there any rumors? I should dispel it. Empower actions, involve people in the process. When you start having your team of a change agents, that is how you start restructuring your organization or making up a group which is dedicated for your change plan, change action. So you start empowering them, giving them more autonomy, giving them more authority, giving them position into the organization structure, giving them some action plan to be followed. So they are the leaders, they are the makers, they are the change agents. So, this is how you have to take people into stride only if you involve everybody into the process. Everybody, those who are key stakeholders. So, the change would take place in the second step according to Kurt Levin's change model. Only if you unfreeze in the first step, then you go into the second step, and finally the refreeze. That is the learnings which is being conducted implemented during the change implementation plan, that learnings would be now very much liquid in state, but we have to make more solid in state. So we have to put it as a refreeze, put it into a refrigerator, and that stage is basically permanent change. The change in the organization culture, the change in the individual's behavior, the change in the group dynamics. So anchor the changes into the culture, basically see what are the gaps and how can we fill it up. Develop ways to sustain the change. We have to keep sustaining the change. Let the change, the methods, the processes, the strategies which we're thinking about has took place, and now we have to keep it sustaining. One should provide the complete support, the complete training to keep this sustaining in process, in liquid stage, so that it gives you a proper organizational outcomes. And celebrate success, of course. If you have reached your milestones, if you have reached your goals, then of course you are liable for a celebration for a success. So according to Kurt Lewin model, this is the three-step model what he has propounded for the change model: unfreeze, change and refreeze. In today's language, we keep on saying it this way: unlearn, learn and relearn. So this is what the entire Kurt Levin's change model. His more important and wonderful method, or I should say an intervention, which even today's OD consultants do follow, do undertake for their solutions for the change plan. So this is basically a model which is called force field model. This model gives you an understanding about two things. One is why there is a motive or there is a need that is which is driving towards a change, and which are those restraining factors or resisting factors, or which are keeping it opposite of it, not making one to change. So this model, according to Kurt Lewin, is basically a two-way model, and this forms is being understood in a more organizational change methods, wherein we see people resisting it and not doing it what is required for. So according to this model, there are few steps, and the step-by-step model talks about that first step is to identify: is there a change? Is there a need? Is there a problem? So one should understand that what is the status quo? What is the current condition? And why do you want it to get changed for? And then the steps follow up till step 7, wherein we understand, yes, there has to be an desired condition and those conditions needed to be achieved. That entire process between step 1 to step 7 is being understood from the perspective of keeping the driving forces in a better way, in a positive way, than the restraining forces more in a negative way. You have to balance it out. One have to make an equilibrium between a driving and a restraining forces. So this technique again was propounded by Kurt Lewin, of course, in 1947. And this genius technique was applied not only to the engineering part, that is not only to the uh, production or organizational part, but also towards the social problems, towards the social change. The social phenomena including the productivity of a factory, the morale on sports team, level of prejudice in a community, and such arenas was covered with the help of this force field model. As I said, there are 7 steps and there is a one methodology, and this is just an example which, if you could decode on yourself, you'll be able to understand what is given in the slide. But yes, we are going to do it more case based, more exercise based in the class. So force field model, which we'll do as an example or as an activity in the class to understand it more in a stepwise manner, and how does it help us to arrive to an equilibrium wherein the driving force and the restraining force is being balanced out with this particular model. Yes, as I was I was telling you that the phenomena of Kurt Lewin even today is being followed, and this is just an glimpse which I like to share with you, that how do outdoor adventural activities as in training intervention, we do also follow the Kurt Levin's method of group dynamics or force field analysis to help individuals understand their SWOT with the help of adventure activities. And also the experiments which Levin did, the sensitivity training, as I discussed earlier, the laboratory training, we do here in our outdoor activities also, which is called outbound training activities. Outbound training, OBT it is called. So in an adventurous setup, there are few exercises, or there are few courses we should say, that each group has to undergo. So this is one of the course, which is what we call the rope course. A net is being given, and this is erected in such a height that one is needed to take it as an individual exercise and try to understand their own capabilities and abilities to undertake this activity. And one by one, each member of a group does this. Alike that, there are a lot of other activities in the outward bound training setup, and this is an organized kind of a training intervention or activity wherein the groups are formed and the groups are being observed for their group interactions, intergroup interactions, their interpersonal relations, and of course their individual contribution towards the group. Few more glimpses. This is what we called adventure setup, and this is a group wherein they are celebrating their success after undertaking these extensive outdoor activities, and an observer who observe these all group and take a note of it and then discuss at the end of the session. The sessions generally could be 1 or 2 days, maximum up to 3 days. In front of you, there are more others, other contributor towards the OD concept. We have Robert Tunman, and his arena of contributing towards OD concept was departmentalization. He worked upon vertically structured groups, how groups were being departmentalized according to their skill set, according to their capabilities and their interest areas. The other contributor towards the OD was Chris Agris. He was an Harvard student, and later he became a faculty over there. And his major contribution towards OD was the team building sessions or team building concept. Why does the team should understand interpersonal competence to make teams achieve their goals and success and ultimately impact the organization effectiveness. So his entire study was into the team aspects, and Robert's study was how these groups can be departmentalized and how these groups behave in their interpersonal relations, their communications. There were few more prominent researchers on OD, and this is in front of you. Douglas McGregor doesn't need you an introduction. He was a behavioral scientist and a very good theorist, which has given a wonderful theory of a motivation. So he worked extensively on line managers and how line managers were more effective when they started working into the groups, and how do they behave when it comes to an interaction between them and the supervisors. So his contribution towards this behavioral science concept was taken for the OD evolution. Herbert Shepard, as earlier I was telling you, the legacy of Kurt Lewin, and he's also very much famous for case technology, the case study based exercises which we do carry in our classroom of the classroom. I should give the entire credit to the shepherd. He was also the first person who understood the top management from a technique called interview surveys. He surveyed a lot of top management people, uh, interviewed them, talked about their entire journey and how do they take it ahead the organization, and those all interviews became the case studies later for the laboratory trainings. Robert Blake and Jane Moulton, they were the inventors of managerial grid technique, and they worked extensively about on the concept called conflict and group conflicts. Why do groups get into conflict mode? Because when we understand groups from two perspective, that groups are being formed for a more productive, more productivity, more performance oriented they are. So the moment one group is being compared with the other group, there is always there is going to be a comparative conflict. There is going to be a comparison about their performances. Some are going to be the winners, some are going to be the losers. And to minimize these all effects on the entire group or an entire department or a unit or an organization, one has to understand the group dynamics. So they come up with an idea that is called managerial grid, a grid which tells you about individuals' strengths, abilities, capabilities in comparison with the weaknesses. So if individual strength and weaknesses is being plotted on a particular grid, how does it follow? So it is an independent study in itself. The entire technique is extensively researched upon and it is still used in the industry for the laboratory training methods or analyzing their performance specifically with the help of managerial grid technique. Richard Beckert was very much inspired by the Douglas work, and he worked upon, he carried on his purview of motivation towards the entire culture. Why the organization's culture is more positive, more vibrant, and not the other culture as such are. So he talked about more of a quality of a work life. We should also focus upon not just the performance part, productivity part, morale or a motivation, but beyond that is what we call the quality of the life of individuals. How do they have their sense of belonging towards the organization? How do they have their non office life, that is non work life, I should say, that is their personal life in the society within the family framework. So this also became the part of the study, that individuals doesn't only need to be observed and studied only in the working dime, domain, but also apart from that they have a life, and that life is also needed to be in a quality life, because the personal life has an impact on a professional life, and there is some linkages. So I should give Richard Beckert a big credit for this, that he propounded this word first, and still on this part of quality of work life the researchers are working upon, and they are finding good inputs to be given to the organization to understand in the different perspectives of an individual, and how do an individual can be benefited more. The Baton Rouge T groups, so it is a nomenclature, or it is one of their experimental group, which was ran by Shepherd and Blake. They were running their training programs, and they named these T groups as the development group. And there then upon, the concept of training was being enlarged towards the development, training and development, and today it is called learning and development. So developmental group, developmental initiatives, the groups which are being given some input for not only their development but for the entire or on holistic development, and therefore the OD was named, and the OD concept got emerged. There is the another model, and there is the another theorist, which is the most recent one, and John Cotter uh, contribution towards the OD concept is based upon his 8-step model, which he basically evolved through his 100 research organizations wherein he worked as an OD consultant, and he went through a lot of experimentation there with different OD interventions, that is in OD solutions, and out of his own research work he understood how the change took place, or how does actually take place in the organization. So he built up the 8-step model, the detailed model. You would find somewhere the relationship, or somewhere the reflection of Levin's model here itself. Levin's was the 3-step model, but then Cotter's is a bit enlarged one. But as we have done the change management plan, the steps for a change management plan, you can correlate those steps with John Cotter's leading change model. It is called 8-step model of a change. So step 1 to step 8 is elaborative in its own sense, and there are notes also given just below the slide. You can refer it, understand it, and as we have already understood in the class with the help of CMP, I am just not elaborating it right now. So these are the two change models, Levin's and Cotter, which is needed to be understood by you as a BBA student. And probably there are, of course, more models, and there are more recent development into it. But then probably this would be uh, the future work of yours. When we go into the specialization arena, there we understand OD detailed model and some more applicable model there and then. For right now, I mean, for this semester, or for this ODC class, we are restricted to Levin's model and Cotter's model of the change. Yes, there is a second generation, which we can say is the newer one, the newest generation, which is still working upon the legacy of Kurt Lewin and the Cotter's contribution towards the OD. And this second generation do have a lot of researchers from the behavior sciences, from the practical organization, and even from the industrial psychology side. We do have few contributors, those who are the second generations, and they are still working upon the different interventions or solutions, the methods which they follow when it comes to an OD exercise or when it comes to a change management. So these are basically 10 shortlisted, I should say, 10 shortlisted uh, methods or models, I should say models or techniques which the second generation of the OD is still evolving. These are 10 topics in front of you are going to be discussed in class in different manner, and we'll take one by one when it comes to OD interventions. So the second generation, basically, I could say that somewhere uh, between 1990 onwards and till today, the people, researchers working on, or the OD consultants working on these application based techniques of OD are still evolving and interesting to understand. This is a sum up slide. This is a wrap up slide for you. The entire concept of history of OD and specific to the Cotter model and Kurt Lewin model. And of course, one of the most important technique which is extensively used today as an OD intervention, the force field model, which will do some exercises in the classroom. By that time, just go through the history of OD. This is a wrap up slide to make you feel better to go ahead with the other contents of an OD, which we'll discuss in coming days time, and those are basically the OD process and the OD interventions. That makes your unit 3 and unit 4 the most vast units of your syllabus. Till that time, I would wish that please replay it if needed and refer some few good books if you wish to dig more upon history of the OD. Thank you so much.